Welcome everyone to the January session of the Southern Fried DNN User Group. We are excited to have everybody here joining us here tonight online, as well as all of you who join us in the playback posted on YouTube later on. Thanks for joining us here tonight. We have an exciting January and start of the new year. Most of us here, at least the ones that are online, are all heavily involved in the upcoming DNN Summit, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But it's kind of a fast and busy January, so thanks for taking a little bit of time out to come spend with us and either watch this or participate in what we're talking about tonight. Tonight's session is going to be a roundtable. We've had a few different roundtable events in the past for Southern Fried, and they've been very popular, very active. One of my favorites was one talking really about security, but we've also had some about module licensing and different comparisons of things. So it's another roundtable event that we're adding to our list here tonight, with a roundtable that really starts up from a Facebook post that Jeremy Ferentz put up in December, maybe late November. Yeah. So we'll talk more about that in a moment, but the idea is, what are the next 3 things you want to see in DNN in the next versions coming forward? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your ideas and our ideas and things we've seen people pitch, and we're going to talk about the proper way to get that into the pipeline so that you're not just shouting into the wind, you are making proper suggestions that are actually going to get some people behind you to get those things accomplished. We are, as often for our Southern Fried DNN User Group meetings, we are sponsored by companies in the community, companies in the industry that are helping make the tools that we use every day. They are doing hosting for the sites we love to work with, and today's session is no less than being sponsored today by RevDebug. We talked about them in, I think, the end of November, but really in December. We had a giveaway for some of our first licenses for RevDebug that went out to some lucky folks who took that home. And tonight we're actually joined by Tom, and I apologize, Tom, I'm looking at you on the screen, but I'm looking for your last name so I can see it real quick. We're going to have Tom on in just a moment to really present and give us an introduction to RevDebug, and we're going to pass the screen to him and run through for a bit. So, and then we'll get into our roundtable. So, as we normally do for a session, we're going to start off with community announcements and information that we wanted to call to attention, things that we're really excited about. Without pause, I can jump right back into DNN Summit. DNN Summit is a month away. We have a fantastic set of classes set up for day number 1 for training for DNN Summit. We have 2 full days of conference speakers giving sessions about .NET Nuke related things, .NET development related things, marketing related things, security and infrastructure related things. There is a mixture of topics for everyone. It is not just for developers. It is not just for integrators. It's really for everybody. We have a wide range of sponsors who are sponsoring DNN Summit this time, and we are looking forward to meeting all of those folks and spending more time talking to them. Primary sponsors really are .NET Nuke Corporate, Manage.com, 10-Pound Gorilla, Engage, Iowa Computer Gurus, Smith Consulting, and a few more of us in the bronze level. And we are all working hard to put on a great convention. And what I can give as a shout out at this point specifically is to say that if you haven't already considered coming, please take some time. Take a look at the sessions that are occurring. If you go to look at speakers or you go to look at the sessions, you can take a look at and see the topics that are being presented for all of these different days. And if there's something there that interests you and or maybe intrigues your boss and says, yeah, your boss should send you out to DNN Summit, we want to see you come. So take a look at the sessions, take a look at the speakers, and then get those registrations in. There's a certain point that's coming up in a few weeks where if you haven't already registered, you may not get your pick of or get a T-shirt or any of the swag that's printed with things because there's a cutoff point for registration. So you can certainly come the day of the event, but you're not going to get a shirt at that point. So If you haven't registered, please heed that call and register. Clint or David, do you want to chime in on anything else there, DNN Summit related?
Yes, I think we should mention the. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If you in the DNN Digest, you'll see it, but the DNN Summit survey link. If anybody's watching this live or on replay, I think it's in the top paragraph in the editor's notes. Yeah, yeah. So if you click on that, it'll take you to a survey. We're just trying to get feedback. If you're going, if you're not going, we want to know why in both cases. And it's very short. We're just trying to get some sentiment there. So I think we should mention that. And then also, you know, the slope portion is always a great time. And yeah, so Ryan, you've got your lightsaber. I think you should show that off.
I think last year I brought it and then forgot to put it on camera the month before, but the etching is finished. If you haven't been to a summit before, you'll know that I'm a geek. You can figure that out just by talking to me most of the time. But I'm a Star Wars fan, and I combine those things together by making some artwork and doing customization on some DNN Summit sabers, some lightsabers. And the etching is finished now on the Summit saber for this year. I'm not sure how it's going to show up in the video. But I not only etched it, but I also did black enamel in it. So it's really, really visible this year. And this lightsaber is very bright and very loud compared to previous years. So this is a really good setup. This is one of the giveaways that More Creative does for DNN Summit. So if you're a Star Wars fan, come on. You'll have a pretty good chance of walking away with a piece of artwork there for you.
Can I touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't drop it on the floor. That's happened before, like at presentation.
A little lighter than the
previous ones? Yes, it's a little smaller. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so DNN Summit, we are all excited about it. If you have any questions about DNN Summit, ask us, ask the community, post questions on Facebook. There are a million reasons to get you out there. And if you're interested, let us know, and we'll talk to who we need to help get you out there. If we need to talk to your boss, we will do it for you. Okay, so DNN Summit is coming up in February. It's a good point for me to mention that because of that, we will not be having a Southern Fried meeting in February because we will be at Summit. So be sure to look at the Twitterverse and look on YouTube for videos to be posted. You'll get to see some of the stuff that's going on, and then when we have our session in March, we'll do a recap and talk about it and the fun we had. So moving on from other community items, I'll kind of come over to the DNN community blog page. Many of the most recent posts are about the tag and the different meetings that have been had by the Technology Ecosystem Advisory Group and different things that are coming out there. But I'm going to jump over.
That's my fault. That's my fault.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was in the process of muting.
Oh, sorry.
That's my fault. I was a bit late, and I published them all the same day.
Oh, I see, Daniel. Got it. Well, good to know. I'm going to come back over to that page if we need to pick up some of these, especially translation items and things in a second. But Clint, do you want to walk us through some of the things in the January Digest that are community noteworthy?
Yeah, I got a question. Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so the mute on the mic doesn't work. I'll just verifying there.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you scroll down in this DNN Digest, we mentioned the survey, but right there, the virtual user conference, this is something that happens every quarter. The DNN Corp CEO, Andy Treva, hosts that, and you can get some good information in that event. So I want to highlight that. We also, show love to the Toronto area user group. They have meetups frequently, and Andrew Heffling spoke on what was that, 6th? Or no, it's February 6th. He's going to speak. Hammond did the last one, I think. But this Keymaster thing he's working on is pretty cool, so should definitely check that out. Obviously, we've got Summit. And then Mitchell Sellers has, posted a recap blog on the, like last year, the year in review. So you should definitely check that out if you have time. It's pretty good. He's posted some pretty good blogs. I mean, I feel like every DNN Digest I have cited one of his blogs, right? It's like year in review, the future, .NET Core. So, that's kind of his section right now. But anyway, it's a good year in review. And then I think it's just like a partner feature and then some featured tweets. Well, the featured content, the remove.bg, I think a lot of people know about that now. But yeah, those are kind of the highlights. I mean, obviously you can see the pull requests.
Go
ahead.
I said we're going to talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, I was also going to give a shout out to the DNN Docs team. Where a lot of work going on behind the scenes. It's not kind of being talked about externally, but there is some good stuff going on. Yeah, Ryan.
The Docs team. What's it sound like when you get a successful build?
Did you see the tweet?
Yeah, I did.
Well, so you would have to understand like the story behind that, and I was like going back and forth with Jeff Hardy. He's like, I don't understand. What does this mean? What is this? And I'm like, all right, for I don't know how many months or weeks or whatever it's been, we've been getting all these like error messages, just like page after page after page. When you go through the build and you get the error messages, they spit out yellow. And we did the build yesterday. That finally was just like all white, and it was like, oh, the site finally is, running, and there is no yellow error message. So for me, it was kind of a milestone in the journey, right? So I got it done.
Yep. All right. Well, another community thing that you called out to was about Azure DevOps. Andrew Heffling, who we've had on plenty of times, he's going over to TADOG next month to show off some things he's been working on. He's going to probably come out in March and talk to us about that because I was already talking to him about it last week too. But one of the things you had here in the January Digest is his shout out about Azure DevOps. And I thought that was a good time to mention that we have a new set of our .NET Foundation magazines here in the office. So if you're here or in person, you're able to pick these up. This particular issue, I'll try and bring it up on screen, is all about Azure DevOps. And I think the cover is, if I'm making a guess, it's an all your bases are mine kind of graphic on the top of this. So it's kind of a fun thing. But to those that I've sent out care packages to, just know that I'll hold, a magazine or two together, and then when they get enough, I'll ship them back out again. So Daniel, I don't know how long it took for you to get yours, but I did send yours out same day as everybody else's. Everybody else will get them eventually. We just put them in packages and that. I send them out every few months. All right. Well then, moving on from some community things, we did talk about Andrew Heffling here. His Keymaster is an interesting thing that we'll talk about the next month that we have a session because he's really wanting to lock down some things in security that haven't been locked down in the past. I don't know if he's going to work it in there yet, but I talked with him about encrypting the web config, which was a feature that I used to enjoy in a really old DNN 6 and hasn't been around since, and I'd love to see it come back into this. So we'll talk about that soon. So he's got some release goodies. David, quick blurb about MV Quick Theme so we can talk about in March too.
Yep, MV Quick Theme 2.0 has hit, and it is actually quite fantastic if I do say so myself.
I wish there was a way that you could, arbitrarily decide that someone else thought it too. What happens to be the Google PageSpeed Insight scores on an MV Quick Theme right now?
I will tell you that we are scoring with mobile 95 out of 100, and with desktop 100 out of 100 with a base install.
I would say that just a few days ago, while I was checking out some things on PageSpeed Insight, I ran MV Quick Thing, and I think that was the first time I'd seen 100 score like that on a DNN site, and I was thrilled. Then I found several more afterwards, but man, yours was first, and I was impressed.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Good stuff. So we will talk more about that in March, along with our recap of other things. I do want to wrap out the, finish up the community things. Lightsabers. You have to put it on camera if you turn it on.
I didn't realize that was actually still a button.
I know. So, Oliver Hine put a tweet out. They got a lot of retweets afterwards. It caught my attention because he was encouraging everyone to come in, and that's the point of what we're talking about tonight as well. But Oliver says, so far we've processed 227 pull requests submitted by 26 people. That many pull requests were not pulled all of 2 or 3 years previously, and they were all pulled here. That's amazing. And 26 people for the upcoming 9.3 release. And if you'd like to get into this, if you'd like to participate, really join in with the advisory group and get involved. But get involved in GitHub, get involved. Oliver here is suggesting, contact him and he'll get you involved on your first pull request. And we're gonna come back around to that. But
hey, one-on-one with Oliver Hine. Hey, that's a good thing right there.
Well, so the 9.3 release candidate is out. Who's qualified to talk about this a little bit? David, do you want to talk a little bit about some points in it, or Clint, do you know?
Yeah, Clint, if you want to, it's fine. The thing that I would highlight
or Daniel even.
There's quite a bit, and yeah, Daniel definitely is qualified to talk about this. Probably, there's a lot to highlight here, but a significant effort has gone into, it's not something that you're just going to see visually. As a matter of fact, nothing changed visually on some of this stuff, but behind the scenes, getting versions of things like React and some of the dependencies in the persona bar up to current versions was one of the biggest efforts in the 9.3 releases coming up.
And one of the articles that was present in the community blog was about getting your persona bar components up to DNN 9.3 because you have to be on React 16. So that's one of the things that's coming up.
Who is one of I guess 3 of us or so that was really focused on the persona bar. One of the others being Daniel Velatis. Those 2 guys are the real heroes in this. Was helping support some of that, but he published this to really help anybody who has developed a persona bar extension or is going to be involved in any of the DNN stuff, really understand mechanically what was happening there and how to upgrade and prepare for 9.3. I also mentioned there's been some, albeit baby steps, but some steps taken towards accessibility in the persona bar, so that's been very nice.
Oh, nice.
I think we'll see more in upcoming releases, but there's definitely some starts there.
Okay. Clint, anything you want to add? Or Daniel, there?
Yeah, to add to that, I mentioned that there's not much visible because it's a lot of development tasks, but there's a couple old features that were brought back, such as the page icons. So if you have sites that use page icons, you can manage them again.
Nice.
And the host email, which is not a big thing, but if you need to change it now, you don't need to go in the database.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Google Analytics.
And Google Analytics connector.
To manage Google Analytics back in the interface through a connector that Mike Smeltzer was contributing to the platform.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
also,
I gotta ask a question. Daniel, is that your new video camera? It feels like your face is just so well lit.
Yes, I have light in front of me now.
It's like a glamorous shot.
Also a couple steps towards GDPR, because we now have cookie consent, and you can have custom terms and privacy pages instead of the ones that come from localization.
Interesting.
So that's a couple first steps towards that.
Sure. Well, at this point, wrapping up community items, there's always more to talk about, and we do stay online doing that a lot during the weeks in between meetings and between other user group meetings. You can find us all online, not only in the Facebook location for DNN Connect, on Adderson's DNN Open Friday, which is the Slack channel where you can join in really all the time for instant requests and questions and access. But on Fridays, several of us stay online in the mornings to help answer questions. So you'll find us online there, but then, of course, in all of our community events in general. But it's time for me to really switch gears and for us to all take a look at RevDebug. RevDebug has been a sponsor for us now for a few months. help sponsor not only Southern Fried DNN User Group, but also a few meetings specifically. And along with the meeting today, we have some giveaways at the end of the meeting. So we're going to kind of switch presenters over, pass it back over to Tom and let him give us an introduction. But be sure to stay on for the whole thing because we'll have some giveaways at the end of the day. All right.
Great. Can you see my screen?
We do. We see your PowerPoint screen.
Great. Okay.
Perfect.
So hello again, guys. It's a real pleasure to be able to give you a presentation today. I see you are all excited from the beginning of this meeting, so let's go on. Maybe a quick introduction. RevDebug is a reverse debugging extension for Visual Studio. And it has actually been created by a company with over 20 years of experience in software development. We actually found out that we would like to be able to faster find and fix the bugs. And that's how RevDebug came to exist. We decided that it's actually such a good value to have such an extension that we decided to create a whole new company around this product. So maybe quickly, let's compare RevDebug to something from the real world. I'm not sure if you ever heard about a black box on an airplane. But basically, black box on an airplane records everything that happens inside an airplane. So if there's a crash, some accident, the technicians can later recover the black box and find out what actually happened. Who's the culprit or what's the cause of an accident. In the same way, we can add RevDebug to applications, and RevDebug will be recording everything that's happening when running an application. Later you can just load the recording and find out what's the cause. So without further ado, let me quickly move to Visual Studio. And here it is. Let me open a demo project that comes together with a trial of RevDebug. And this. Okay. RevDebug pane. The first thing I need to check is whether I have any project checked in my solution. Okay, I have it. So once I run this project, RevDebug will also automatically start recording everything that I do. It's building. Let's give it a second. Okay. You can see that we've got a small window here. Let's close it too. Window here that says recording, the name of the project, time, and the number of unhandled and handled exceptions. The same on the right here. And let's try running an example with exception. The application will crash, and I will just find out through the recording what actually happened. New, and it should be extracted in a second. Okay, great. So you can see here on the right is actually a control panel of the recording. I have the recording extracted and loaded inside my Visual Studio. With the arrows here, I can move step by step to each line of the code that was executed. And below, I have a list of all the methods and events inside of those methods that were recorded by RevDebug. An event is basically any assignment of value, any chain of value. And by just clicking on those, I can also move in the code. But since we want to find an exception, let's just filter for it. Exception unhandled. And here it is. You can quickly see that the exception happened when we were trying to assign a new value. And if you want to get into some more details, we can just go back in the recording step by step and see how the values were changing over time. Okay, there's actually more. For example, I want to know where value Chevrolet showed up in the code. Here's the search window. For the recording, I can just write Chevrolet. Oh, a typo, Chevrolet. And I can see that the value Chevrolet showed up 4 times in the code, and I can just quickly see what was happening with that value. Also, there's also a locals window. That gives you even a better overview of all the variables here from the recording, the current value, and if I click on the RevDebug logo, I'll actually get the list of all the states and values that the variable took over the time. For example, if I just click here on the timeout, you can see that I moved to that point in the recording, Pontiac, say, okay. So maybe I would like to quickly show another example with the threads. My Visual Studio is running exceptionally quickly today, so you'll be able to see more. It's recording. Okay. Let's close this, and it will also automatically load the recording. And maybe quickly, I'm not sure if you can see it. The recordings are just saved in my RevDebug folder in Documents. Okay, what interests me here, I also have a normal recording loaded here, but what I want to show you here is the threads window. Basically, for any multi-threaded application, you can see in RevDebug at which point in time which thread was being used. And just by clicking on the rectangle here, you can move also through the recording. If you would have some exceptions, in this case, in this application, there are no exceptions, but if you would have some, you would also see such red triangles or yellow triangles, depending if it's handled or unhandled exception, right over the rectangle. So if there's some point in your application where a lot of exceptions happen, you can just have a quick visual overview on which thread and where they actually happen. The last thing I would like to quickly show you in Visual Studio is the Performance Profiler. This is the place, once you load a recording, this is the place where you have the list of all the methods, how many times they were called, and mean and overall execution time of those methods. This is great if you want to find out where are the bottlenecks of the performance when using your application. And it also can be good if you have some newcomer that you want to introduce to your project. You can quickly see a good overview of what's actually being used in your project. Okay, let me move back to the presentation.
We were on mute, but I was chiming in and saying that screen right there, that's really something special. That doesn't happen. You can't really get that anywhere else, right?
It's not easy.
This Performance Profiler?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know any other extension that gives that.
That's pretty fantastic. Yeah.
And there's of course more, so I want to run quickly over all of that.
Go.
If I manage to, then we can have a minute or two for questions. Okay, so what I've been doing till now, I've been just showing you RevDebug local in Visual Studio, just this small box. But you can do more. You can build your application with RevDebug and have your clients use them. You can use RevDebug either on test environment or on production. So you deploy your application with RevDebug. This is your client. He opens your applications, uses it, but everything that he does is actually being recorded. And once he decides to stop using your application, just closes it, or the application crashes, what happens is that the recording is being extracted and sent to a server, RevDebug server. RevDebug server is basically set on any of the most popular cloud services like Azure, Amazon Web Services, or Docker of your choice. And every recording from a client will be stored on that server, and you can download it anytime to your local Visual Studio. As long as you have the same code, the same project, you can load the recording, and you don't need to reproduce the environment of your client. You just grab the recording and see exactly in details what he was doing when running your application. You can find out what kind of errors, exceptions he actually had, what kind of data he was using. Basically, everything you can just see from the recording. So quickly about performance. This is actually performance from an open source application. You can see that without RevDebug and between not using RevDebug and using full recording, there's about 20% difference in performance. Depending on your application, it can be even higher, from 20%, I think, even up to 300%. But keep in mind that you won't be using RevDebug all the time. You want to use RevDebug when there's something that you want to improve in your application, and when you want to find and fix some bug. These are the cases that you would be using RevDebug most of the time. And to further reduce the performance loss, you can exclude whole projects from your solution. These won't be recorded. You can use RevDebug ignore file. Basically, you choose which files from a project you don't want to record. You can use whitelisting. With whitelisting, you can just choose a few lines of code that you want to record. And with region no time travel, you can do the opposite. You can choose which lines of the code you don't want to record. What's more, at any time you can stop and start the recording. For example, you start your recording, but after some time, after clicking some things, you decide to stop it. You get a recording extracted of that part. You start recording again, stop it after some time, you get a recording of another part. That's also possible. And the last thing, a crash recording mode. What I've shown you so far was full recording, but we also have something called crash recording. Basically, crash recorder returns a set number of events before a crash and returns the recording only if a crash happens. It all goes in your favor, since you still will be able to find out what caused the crash, what was the cause of the crash, and at the same time you won't be using so much of bandwidth. And this is actually data from a research about reverse debugging. The researchers found that it's possible to even double the time spent on product development by using such a tool. If you go into details and realize that you don't need to reproduce the environment of your client, that many of your worries or the things you have to do actually cease to exist once you use such an extension, then definitely these numbers are possible. And of course, this time spent on debugging can be even reduced by 3 times, from 60 to 18%. All right. And this is actually a cherry on the cake, something we still didn't release publicly. This is a RevDebug monitor. Basically, for your application, it lists all the versions, and here you can find the numbers of exceptions that happen on different days. And what's more, you can also see all the types of exceptions, the log from them if you just click on the name of the exception and how much bad do they do to your clients. You can see how many clients were affected by that exception. So it's actually quite good for the people who have to decide what should be fixed next. And what's more, if you go into specific release, you can see where are the users that currently use that version. The number of users, where they live, and what kind of exceptions happen for that select release. Alright, just a quick wrap up. RevDebug currently works on Visual Studio with C# and Visual Basic. You can also use it on Xamarin and Unity. And once you use RevDebug Server to record on test environment and in production, you can use it with the most popular currently released cloud services. Okay, guys, that was basically it, quickly. You can try RevDebug anytime after going to our website. We offer a free 2-week trial with a 1-week extension, so 3 weeks. And anytime, feel free to reach out to me with any questions you might have. So it's 40 minutes, 1 minute for any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. That's a really good introduction. And even though I watched one of the demo videos around Christmas time, I don't think I caught several of the things that you were describing today. That's pretty fantastic.
Great that you enjoyed.
David, Clint, you guys are watching the chat lines. Any questions coming in there from chat?
No questions in there. Does anybody online have questions?
All right.
Wow, there was your chance. You missed it.
Well,
time to answer anyway.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tom, for being on. Hope you're going to stay with us here for the rest of the session tonight.
It's actually 1.
Yeah, it's very late or very early, whichever way you want to say. So if you are stepping out, thank you very, very much, not only for joining us here tonight, but also for partnering with us to be a sponsor. I know everybody here appreciates it, and folks who are picking up the prize giveaways are appreciating these things. When we do hand those out, we give the requirement they need to come back and give us all a review and some notes and thoughts of using it. So we'll be sure to wrangle you back in when they come in and share their thoughts. So thank you, Tom, and thank you, RevDebug. If you are stepping out, I want to be sure to thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me join today, and have a great rest of the evening.
All right, thank you. Well, so we dive into the meat of our session tonight. This is something that we really started talking about in December, really. There were some discussions about what we were going to be doing here in January before we went out to DNN Summit, and trying to think of what we would do for a portion of time. And it was around then that Jeremy, does it say the date he posted this? It wasn't November the 8th, was it?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought it was in the beginning of December. Jeremy Ferentz posted a question out to the DNN Connect Facebook group. And he posted the open-ended question, what are the top 3 things you want to see in DNN 10 next year? There are a couple of things that his question is presupposing, as in, we're just jumping right to 10 as a number for things that we might be able to pitch for. But at this point, we talked just a moment or two ago about the 9.3.3 release candidate and the fact of all the things that had gone into 9.3. And so we don't really have to be talking only about something that's far enough out that it's going to be at a DNN 10 number level. Mitch was invited. He may join us tonight. He may not. We do know that he's got baby duty. I know that we got a bunch of new fathers here in the group, Clint included, so they're not always able to make it with us. But Mitch, earlier in the year, talked about the very specific roadmap ahead and what constituted version number changes and what constituted a move up to a number 10. So that's already been talked about. the things that we're talking about tonight don't have to wait for a 10. They can go in at any point in time. The point of a conversation like this is to get the ball rolling, get people moving and thinking about the things that they want to see different in DNN, the things they want to see added, new functionality, new features, and start getting those into the right pipeline. Up until now, really up until recently, DNN releases, new versions, new improvements, pull requests that were getting processed. There wasn't a lot of community drive to that. There wasn't a lot of community handwork that could be involved in it. DNN Corp was managing the majority of all of those items, and though some things were finding their way in, it's not the same landscape that we have today. One of the things that we find is that, I don't know if it's the right analogy, but a lot of DNNers, folks who've used DNN in the past, they're coming in out of the cold. You know, they're coming in and they're seeing activities and they're seeing things start to happen in DNN, and they feel like they haven't seen that for a while, so they're coming in now, and immediately they jump in with complaints or ideas of things they want to see. And we already tackled that. That's already been discussed, and it's already in the pipeline, and here are 2 versions of steps towards that already. You're shouting about something that's already in progress. So I think that conversations like this are a really good first step for a lot of folks to realize, A, that talking about what ifs and things that you'd like to see, if they're esoteric, if they're wide and open ideas, I would like the best WordPress. In what? In what specifically? You want to talk about file management? You want to talk about user interface? What specifically you're talking about you like? Getting shovel ready, getting actionable, down to items that you can say, okay, this is what we want to achieve. What steps are we going to take towards achieving it? Where does it fit? That's what's useful, and that's what's helpful in this type of conversation. And so with Jeremy's post and the things that are that came out of Facebook that people have put in, I thought it would be great for us to have a conversation about that here at Southern Fried. So what we're doing tonight is a roundtable, and we are kind of opening up the same question. What are some things you'd like to see, the next 3 improvements that you'd like to see added in, feature changes, improvements, things that you'd like to see coming into DNN, and we're going to talk about those, and we're going to talk about the proper ways to get those now into the pipeline, because you don't just have to shout into the wind and hope somebody hears you and it magically happens. There's a process now. Through the technical advisory group, through the work in GitHub, there's now a structure for you to go through. And if you have an idea, you go to GitHub and you post that idea, and that gets vetted, and it gets talked about, and it gets put into the pipeline, and you know what? It gets pulled, and it gets into releases. And that's part of what excited me so much about Oliver's post that was really just a few days ago here in January. And he said, so far we've processed 227 pull requests submitted by 26 different people for the upcoming 9.3 release. If you're not excited about anything that's going on in DNN, this right here should make you more excited than anything, because you know what? This isn't a singular event. This is following up with the 9.2 release, and the following up with the release before that, which have all had community activity and community involvement and items added into the releases. So with that, I'm going to kind of open the floor. We have several folks here online with us tonight that I think could really speak to some of the things that have already been talked about, can already speak to some of the things that are being worked on for the near future. We have Andrew Heffling, we have Daniel Validus, we have Clint Patterson, David Poindexter. We've got some people who've all been paying attention to what's going on. So I'd love to open the floor to you guys.
Did you say something?
I did. I said how fantastic your ideas are, and we want to hear them.
Of course. Yeah.
So I want to open the floor and kind of pass the mic to let some folks here jump in and talk about what are some of the things that you would like to see, and or of some of the things that have been discussed that you see ahead. What are some things that you think are really interesting? I have a couple things I want to bring in, and I'm also going to cherry pick some from this Facebook list to talk about things that are suggestions that have been talked about.
Well, for one thing, I think it's kind of important. Is there a police chase going on somewhere? No, I was just going to say it's important for us at this moment to kind of reflect back and look at where we are to be at a point to where we can even have this conversation, right? So over the past year, we've come a long way in the sense of the transition, the shift. You know, the community can actually do stuff. Like we're sitting here debating on like what should the future hold. And there's a reason that we're having that conversation, and I think a lot of credit is due to the people who have stepped up and rolled their sleeves up and been more action than talk. So I would just like to, you know, again, kind of reiterate that message, but also giving kudos to the people who are, you know, stepping up. And I mean, it's great. We're truly open source, you know, back to the roots. But I just wanted to kind of chime in or drop that perspective that we've come a long way.
Well, until someone else is ready to join in, I'll give a good example of a post that I liked off of the Facebook post, Jeremy's Facebook post that he started. Let's see if I can say this right. Torsen Wegan chimed in and said one thing he'd like to see in the future in DNN is a mobile-friendly login module. And he felt like the login module hasn't really updated in a while, and he would like to see a mobile-friendly login module. And I thought that's a good example of something that's not esoteric. He didn't say, I want to have a bunch of login options. He said, let's get mobile-specific on the module. Can we get this thing to be displayed well on mobile? And there was some conversation back and forth about it. And at one point, it was mentioned that it actually is fairly editable. The styles in it just need to be worked on, but you can work on it to make it mobile-friendly. So really at the end of that, someone came back and said, you know what, really, the HTML is not perfect on it today. It could use some improvement. But really, what would really be nice is if the default settings for it were already a responsive theme that was a true, you know, handling those attributes correctly so that it was mobile responsive out of the gate. So you can obviously fix it a bit, but if the starting one that came when you installed a vanilla DNN started off that way, that would help.
You have to modify it. I think
right
there, and that's the dilemma. You don't want to modify.
Exactly. So this is a good idea of something that is a shovel-ready type of description that is not a lofty goal, but it makes an impact a little bit at a time.
It does open up conversation, though, right?
Which part of that?
Which is an age-old conversation about dependencies of CSS frameworks and how to make something responsive, you know, and if it's something that is a framework-dependent thing or, yeah, but now, hey, we've got Flexbox, we've got things that are built right into the browser, which is not a framework-dependent thing, so we can go down that path, right?
So maybe it's a better example than I realized because it seems simple and actionable.
Yeah.
But it opens up a can of worms of where are we going CSS framework-wise in the future.
What CSS framework?
Okay. Well, you don't necessarily need a CSS framework to get the login module mobile-friendly. I mean, if you're looking at the video, this is a mobile-friendly login module on a DNN website. It's the same exact CSS I use on many different websites, and it's not using Bootstrap. It's just pure CSS for it. And granted, I styled the buttons in a certain manner. I styled the inputs of the form for username and password in a certain manner, but it's just utilizing pure CSS, and it looks good on mobile. Looks good on desktop.
Sounds good. Sounds like
Andrew is
going to.
Andrew has the pull
request ready to go next week, and we're good to go.
Well, so let me back that one up just a
well, there's a couple things with so before you start unpacking, I had to take the initial set of styles and I hacked at them pretty hard to get it working. So yes, I have it working. It is not a pull request ready solution. I probably should have led with that.
Okay.
There you go. Now we're getting
those styles into our skin.
So it wasn't quite straightforward.
No, but this is the best. This is the best example. I think this is a specific task that we can stay on target with and say, we know we want to achieve something. There are a few different ways we can do it. We can back it to a higher level and talk conceptually about other things that we could also do that would make it a good improvement. But short term, what's a solution we could do versus long term, what's another solution we should plan on doing? The way to start that process running and getting it recorded is to get the pull request out there. To get
actually to get an issue created.
Sorry, yes, I said pull request, but I meant issue.
And you may or may not know we're using a prefix now.
Can we go to one and can we talk about that now?
Yeah, just go to an issue area and you'll see several of them.
I'm logged into my GitHub account here, sharing screen. You're going to see that I'm not terribly active. I've put in a couple of issues over time, but I'd love to talk about this because this is one of the things that 4 months ago, this idea wasn't formalized. This idea wasn't structured the way we're talking about it today. And it is really that if you have something you want to have done, you can go to a Facebook conversation, you can come join us at a user group, but more than anything, you just need to go to GitHub and post an issue request and go in and say, hey, I've got this idea, document as much as you can about it, and maybe you're the person who can propose the changes, maybe you're not, but you got the conversation started.
And that was the important part.
That's a very important point because social media is fine for chatting about stuff, but if you want actions to happen, that's where it needs to go.
Yes. So what's the prefix that we're putting in on this here?
Let's scroll down a little bit more, go to another page, maybe.
Okay.
Actually, let's get, there you go. There's
RFC. So, all right, so here we go.
Improved login. Looks like we already have.
You know what? We might have one here, but we have RFC. This is request for change?
Request for comments.
Request for comments.
Is what that is.
Okay.
So this is where the dialogue officially starts.
Let's just load this one. This is a good starter. Login experience has remained unchanged for years and shows its age. We blah, 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 blah. Doesn't mention anything here about mobile. So we
notice the date on this one.
This was in,
3 days after
the Facebook?
The conversation.
Yeah, number 3 mentions it.
Yeah. Number 3 mentions it, you think so?
Yeah.
Number 3, it's not responsive. Oh, okay.
So Peter's watching what's going on. This is an example of someone noticing what's going on in social, and then, okay, well, let's put this in a channel that can be actionable, and here it is.
So what you're saying is Facebook is for gossip, but then when you're ready to actually do something, you got to get up.
Yeah, if you want to bitch and gripe, and just, word vomit, then Facebook's great for that, and Twitter's great for that.
So even wherever you are, and wherever you are, I would encourage you to be positive in action when you're describing things. You can have a gripe session anywhere you want to, but when you're done with it, do you feel better about the gripe? You might sometimes. Did you make other people feel better? No. Did you change the situation? Probably not. This is a way to get involved and to take action with stuff.
Yeah, and to be objective, trying to be objective instead of subjective.
And the structure now allows us to continue that conversation here in a way in which we are participating. So for this login one, for instance, Daniel, he's in there. He gave some mentions. I chimed in and I gave +2 on the comment of having 2-part authentication as an option. I'd love to have that, and we've had a client ask about that before, and we haven't had a way to deliver that in the DNN sites traditionally. And so here are the conversations that lead towards turning this into something that people start working on. And if you're not someone who can be doing that work yourself, you can still come here and you can participate.
And you may be so broad, like this may be actionable, but this is one of those things
like
where
5 actions. This is a little bit too broad.
It's one of those things where this may get pared down into multiple other issues that are more
shovel ready.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They're more isolated so that you can actually do something in code without doing a ton of stuff in code to do it. You break it into smaller chunks.
This and also breaking changes, because there's a lot of those ideas that would involve a breaking change for the old sites and old modules and stuff like this. So this is where planning starts on what goes into which release. So making it mobile friendly could be done right now, but the other ideas that would involve a breaking change would go in 10 or 11 because it's a breaking change.
Hey, Daniel, why don't you real quickly just go over what the rules now are as far as versioning goes in DNN, and what is a dot release, what is a dot release, what is a major release,
So if only the last digit changes, there should be absolutely nothing to expect bad, because it's
no breaking change.
Bug fixes. Yeah. Strictly speaking, if the middle number changes, there is some addition or some minor change that should not be a breaking change for modules and stuff. That would be kept for a major release, so when the first number changes. Now, some stuff blurs the line. So what we did with the React dependencies, it could break some stuff, but a decision had to be made, and we decided to put it in 9.3, even though technically speaking it would be a breaking change, but there's very few module vendors that have persona bar modules. So the effect should be limited, and we have good steps to upgrade your things. And we cannot wait years on front-end dependencies, because every 2 days there's a new one.
Yep.
So we need to be faster on that than on, for instance, the APIs. And the rule ideally is to have any breaking changes to the APIs and to the core. They have 2 versions apart. So if it's marked deprecated in 9, it will be removed in 11. That's a plan.
Why don't you repeat that one?
Yeah,
again,
that last part is important.
So that,
because it's a big difference.
Yeah, so let's say you're a module developer, you develop now, and you have your warnings enabled. If you see any warning that a method is deprecated, it still works. But if it's deprecated in 9, it's going to be gone in 11.
Oh,
no, not in 10, in 11. Okay. You should have 2 numbers between marking it deprecated and removing it in an ideal world.
So, Ryan, switch over to your issues again there and change the, well, you moved it, go to one of those issues there, and it doesn't matter which one, and then change the number at the end to 2469. So Jeremy Ferrets, who actually started the kind of conversation there, actually put this issue in very specific to the mobile
login and making a login mobile. Right.
So one of the things that may happen is we try not to duplicate stuff, but you may not be aware of another issue that already exists that addresses partial or all of it or more.
And that's
of
okay.
It's okay. That'll get sorted out in the end. And if issues can be referenced with each other and so forth. So, you know, a pull request may come in ultimately that closes both of these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see that.
For those that are, you know, maybe not be familiar with the...
So, I have a question about this. So, this is all really good that we're chatting about making, or in this scenario, chatting about, oh, there's something wrong in the platform. We want to get to somewhere else with the platform, and here's some thoughts and ideas. So, as a developer or somebody with a note or maybe a CSS wizard, how would that person go about trying to make those changes? Maybe they see that and they say, I need to do this for my website. Why don't I share that code with somebody? If they don't have good knowledge of where that code lives, but they know how to do it through the DNN Platform user interface, what would be a good, I guess, path for them to go down for getting help?
I'd hope you're kind of rhetorically posting that, because I think that's exactly how we do it. Let's use you and me as an example. I am not a traditional developer in the sense that I'm not going to be diving into Visual Studio and going to find pieces or elements of core to modify. No, I'm just not going to. I might, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'll find the CSS that's involved in the rendered finished version, and I'll say, you know what, with this change and that change to these lines and those lines, it works. Who can get this into core? And I'll just post it back in the issue and say, hey, whomever has an ability to touch this, can somebody look at this? I mean, the point is you've made help and you've moved it forward. So I might take that and then ping you and say, hey, Andrew, can you find where to put this in place? I'm not sure where it goes.
Yeah,
isn't that the point of it?
Yeah, I did multiple of those in the core modules where the solution was in the text, but they didn't know how to use GitHub and stuff. So I just took that, made it a pull request, and problem solved.
And that's a really good point because, some people may feel like they have an idea, but because they're not a developer or whatever, or they don't do GitHub, it's like, well, no, you can still post an issue. You don't have to be the one that actually does it. Just try to convey it in a way that can be understood by other people and actions created on it.
And even I've done a lot of stuff for the React dependencies, updates, and stuff, but I'm not an expert by far. I know React for about 2 months, and there's a couple of the pull requests that I got halfway, and I could not complete. I lacked some piece of information, some knowledge, so I still committed that with a request for help. Who can help me finish that? And we got a couple things resolved in short 15 minutes, half-hour meetings that we got our heads together to solve something complicated, and without that, it would not be done.
Yep. Okay, so then I have a couple of ideas of things that I want to post or suggest, but I also want to see what else everyone else might have. I really ran through the majority of the Facebook post, and it's not to say that there isn't anything worth discussing in there, but I think we really picked a really good one to start off with in that mobile responsive login, in that it was a nugget. It was an item that could be discussed. Many of the other posts inside of Facebook have been, improved performance. Okay, that's like saying I would like to be better. There's so many things you could do to make me better. It's just so open and wide. You want to improve performance in DNN? First off, start working inside of a modern skin that is properly utilizing the tools that DNN has had in it for years, because not all skin developers know how to do that and have been doing it. My suggestion for improving performance immediately is to go get NV Quick Theme and put it on your site and do comparison tests between your current skin and the exact same DNN instance in NV Quick Theme. Does it load much faster? Does it get better rankings on waterfall tests and things from Pingdom or from Google PageSpeed Insights? If it does, your skin is a major problem. That's a quick, easy way for you to start seeing where some performance changes could be. Mitch Sellers writes a lot about performance. You can come to DNN Summit and hear a lot of things about performance. But just saying, I want performance improvements doesn't benefit anybody because you're not getting specific. And
I'll post that one for you. So.
Oh, absolutely. And there are known things you can do to help improve your performance. So improving performance alone, while it is a goal of all of the actions that keep happening inside of DNN, it alone as a request isn't actionable. You're preaching to the choir there. We're all working on performance all the time. So what else can we get into? There were some other notable mentions of things that people want, and maybe they haven't heard about it or know about it. So, for instance, one post in there was they'd love to see something like liquid content being community edition. Sure, that's something that was also talked about briefly in a mention by Andy Treba at the DNN Summit last year. He said he'd like to see something like that too. That might be something that happens in the future, but that is a giant can of worms on its own. There are other things that are also cans of worms that are in description here, but kind of passing it around the room. David, do you have any things that you either want to point out that have been mentioned, or some things that you'd like to see?
Well, mine are more high level, so I won't mention those. But
you got the show ready, man.
No, just kidding. No, like one of the things that this is an aged software, right? It's been around for a long time. It's mature. Maybe that's a better word.
Yeah, I was going to say, I almost take exceptions to the way you said that, but it's a mature product. It's a different statement. I like that. And
one of the side effects of that is you end up with a lot of, technical debt, things that have been there for so long, and they're just not used anymore. People don't even know they're even there.
But before you go too much further in it, in that example, those things have many of those things have been updated and been improved as we go through different versions, that they're starting to get pulled out. We're not having in there as many things we use.
So a lot of methods got removed that were deprecated for so long. Even though that was incredibly painful, I don't want to go through another 9.2.0 experience ever again. In the end, it was the right thing to do. It's just gone about in an interesting way. But the same concept exists, though. There's tons of things in the core API that just needs to be cleaned house. That is not a single actionable item. So,
but as an idea, continuing to improve the API in that many of the API things were more released or more documented just recently, and that was a kind of a change. You want to see some things removed that aren't being used
not
anymore.
Necessarily removed, but cleaned up so that we can ready ourselves for .NET Standard, for instance.
Or just because something still works, don't keep relying on the old way that it was being done, build it from scratch. Kind of like that, at a certain point, Windows didn't keep trying to work. Microsoft stopped trying to take 98 and make XP. They stopped and they built it from scratch, so there weren't old methods being used still in there that just still works. So
as a general idea, that's a thing. Can you get it down to a nugget level in that and say, well, there's some that we know aren't used anymore that pertain to
the work to get the example and be specific enough about it.
Well, and some of those
I'll just swap that out myself.
Yeah. Some of those are the same kind of conversation about the login, right? It's like, well, it sounds like a simple and straightforward thing.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of a can of worms. I'll tell you a conversation that came up the other day. We were talking about the membership provider, underlying membership provider.
ASP.NET membership provider has been the core of things forever.
Well, sort of. And we sort of have our own that was built that's in DNN. Andrew, can speak to this just a little bit.
No, they're together.
We built this. Remember, we built a membership provider on top of the ASP.NET membership provider.
Yeah, like a backpack attached onto the kid who is running. We're the backpack attached onto the ASP.NET membership. That's right.
We had a different opinion on how it should be done for the purposes of DNN, and the way that we do things.
And that's a fundamental core decision that's been around since DNN 2.
And it has not been updated.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be.
With that now is the membership provider has since been deprecated since, I want to say, ASP.NET 2.0, 3.0.
I didn't know that, but I wouldn't have any reason to know that. All right.
It's not that it's been deprecated where Microsoft isn't supporting it, but they're not making enhancements to it as far as I understand, and they might do security updates to it still, but when I looked at the GitHub repo, I didn't see any changes happen to it in a long time. They've recommended different types of authentication systems.
Is there new hotness out there? Something else that...
Oh, yeah. So membership provider was the precursor for, the predecessor, for identity. So when you create a new ASP.NET, whether it's MVC, Razor Pages, .NET Core, nowadays everything talks about using your identity authentication, where the membership provider was the predecessor to that, and then after that, identity seemed to be a more flexible pattern where now with the identity authentication, you can plug and play lots of different types of authentication systems. Like you can use Zero, you can use you can use SQL Server for it. You can use there's all sorts of different ones where the SQL membership provider was tightly coupled to using SQL Server only.
Okay, let me pause and put some structure onto this because I'm now starting to understand what you're talking about. So, as an idea, at the moment, has anything about authentication provider, ASP.NET authentication provider is not the right word, ASP.NET membership, has anything been put about that as an issue into issues in GitHub? And if we did put one in, this would be an example of something that, as the discussion starts to get specific, wouldn't that be something said, you know what, as we make our decisions for .NET Core and steps ahead, this is something that sounds like it should be relegated to that point in time, because when we're jumping train tracks from one to the other, it's the time to go ahead and move on to that other thing too. Would that be the case, Andrew, you think?
And Dave might be talking about a different conversation, but when the conversation was brought up in one of the Slack groups, it was more asking about it and can we rip it out? And the conversation then went to, yes, I would absolutely love to get it ripped out, but it kind of fizzled out fizzled out at that point. I was asked the particular conversation I'm thinking about. I was asking some questions about it and how it worked in the grand scheme of things with DNN, because I'm still new here. Or I'm going to wave that flag for the next 5 years. But I'm trying to get a better understanding of it, and I got the better understanding of it, and then that's when I realized it was really tightly coupled to how we do things in DNN, and it would be a very difficult task to rip it out. And if you have the know-how, you can use different membership providers with DNN. And it's a module I'm working on right now. I created my own custom ASP.NET SQL membership provider. So you do have that ability now. It's just not as easy or intuitive as it is in more recent versions of ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core.
All right.
So it wasn't that that's an issue or anything.
Yeah, no, that's a good
another
good
example.
example.
It's just another example of something that seems so trivial. It's like, why are we using something back from the Stone Ages?
Right.
Well, when you start unraveling the onion, you'll find out.
Sure.
Actually, there's a reason.
Well, when you have a backlog of things you want to get through, and you also have an excited group of people who want to talk about all the things that they want to see happening, the point is you take it all in, and then you decide where each of these things is going to get relegated, where they're going to get divided into, and some of them are going to naturally be immediate action items. Some of them are going to need to be honed in and turned into three or four action items. Others, like this, they might need longer conversations. Things like this seem like appropriate conversations that, once it's put in as an issue, then becomes longer conversations that happen in the technology advisory group and that are shopped around for ideas and opinions, and they move into longer-term action, longer-term items. And that seems perfectly natural to me. So we kind of started because we were talking about APIs, and we went over to the ASP.NET membership, which is, now I understand, that. So that's a good example of a couple of different things. One that was open and just saying, hey, let's clean house a little bit. The other one being a thing to clean house of, not necessarily API related, but just general core related. So that was kind of a start with something on David. That kind of bounced us over to Andrew. Andrew, we brought you in on that one. Do you have anything that you have seen or things that you want to add in as something to our list for today?
Yeah, I do, and I have two. One's kind of large, and one's also kind of large. I lie, they're both large. I'll let you pick, Ryan, on which one we can dive into. So
the large or the kind of large? Let me see.
So I'll give you my two topics, and I'll let you pick. It'll be your dealer's choice there.
Okay.
And so the first one is there are some big problems with trying to run a DNN website in a cloud-hosted app-as-a-service environment. When I say app-as-a-service, that means I am not running my own virtual machine. I am use it for in Azure. It would be called a web app. You don't have access to RDP into that box, but you do have all the same benefits of it being installed on a VM. They just abstract that away to an app, and there's a lot of different problems that you run into with cloud-hosted versions of DNN. One of the big benefits in the cloud is how you can scale up and scale down your web app depending on load. You might be able to start beefing up the server. You might be able to make it geo-redundant, and some of those features just aren't available in DNN. And we can talk more about that if you like that idea. The other idea that I wanted to talk about is I've chatted briefly with Dave about this. Right now, DNN takes a massive dependency on jQuery. And when DNN was first taking that dependency on jQuery, well before my time in DNN, but it was a time in the internet when jQuery was the only game in town to provide cross-platform. And when I say cross-platform, I really mean cross-browser, where something would work in IE, it would work in Firefox, it would work in Chrome and all the different browsers.
And to set the stage there, and this is probably the path we're going to go down because I can also speak into this one more than I can in the other one. To set the stage there, since Andrew, you're a young guy, I think that you were maybe riding a tricycle about the time that this happened with jQuery. There was a time where, as far as JavaScript was concerned, everybody was rolling their own libraries, and we had Moo tools, we had all of these other favorites out there. I had a DHTML lib that I used repeatedly. jQuery came onto the scene, and within a year or so, it beat out all of the other ones, and we were all starting to load it, all of us, into our skins. And we were loading them, and some of the modules were loading it into theirs, and they weren't doing it in ways that it was properly isolated. So you had all of these problems with, oh, your skin worked great, or your DNN site worked great, but then you installed this new module and all hell broke loose because now somebody else had called and instantiated another version of jQuery, and it was blocking the things that were happening with yours because theirs was newer and yours was older, or vice versa. And
we all frantically searched for Bruce Chapman's definitive blogs on this very subject.
Yes, and so when Core finally said, we have jQuery and it's in Core now, you guys don't have to load it, everyone went, oh, thank goodness. And the modules very quickly pulled it out of something as they did. They would check for it. It was there. They wouldn't. Oh, optimistically, I say that that's what was supposed to happen. Skins stopped loading, and you started having a way to control it inside of Core, so that you could say, okay, I want to load X version versus Y version. I want it to be local. I don't want it to be. That was a big improvement, and if you talk to some of us that are used to things being that way and rely on it, I'm happy to have it continue being that way forever, and I'm very pleased for it to be so.
I guess where he was going is the making
here's my question, though. My question is, jQuery, I think, is a wonderful tool. I still use it, just about every week of development. But when I'm building a greenfield application, I do not, and for those that don't know greenfield, when I'm building a brand new web application from scratch, no DNN, just .NET and web. On the Angular might be doing something, but I do not use jQuery. I leave jQuery completely out of it. And major platforms like GitHub, they spend a lot of time taking jQuery out of their platform because it's not needed in the current web ecosystem. All of the browsers implement the necessary specs where you can do everything through just native JavaScript and through the latest spec in JavaScript, which is nice that we have that power now. So is it time to have the conversation of maybe removing the jQuery dependency from DNN and how that would look?
Or at the very least, maybe it becomes something that can be turned off easily so that it's there and present if you need it in the short term while people are transitioning. And some people need one thing and other people need the other. And it can be, with a click of a button, be turned off entirely so it's still there and available, but it doesn't get rendered if it's not needed.
So this is interesting because we've actually already made steps in that way.
Let's talk about that.
We just didn't know that we were doing that.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the removal of all of these admin modules that used to live there. And all
this is true.
Okay, where does it get used most? Mm-hmm. In the form patterns that came along with DNN 6.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's when so much work was done on the the UI and the form patterns and the panels and all that stuff that's there that module developers can use. But I mean, you rip jQuery out and all that stuff just goes to pot.
But as we go towards Persona Bar, it doesn't rely on those.
Well, sorry, it does use jQuery.
Right, but the dependencies on so many of those things might have cut down in magnitude.
It definitely helped.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the goal, I don't think. I think the goal was to remove dependencies of web forms.
Right.
But
okay, so Andrew, let's take this one to be specific.
Well, that jQuery discussion brings us all to hard decisions and breaking changes and satisfying everybody. Because DNN has always been in the philosophy of depending on as few possible things. So you can use Angular, you can use React, You can use web forms, you can use MVC. It's always trying not to lock into a specific technology, but jQuery was so ubiquitous that removing it will make half of the people happy and half of the people very mad because they have skins, they have modules, there's a lot of modules that.
Well, let me say this then. Why don't we treat something like that like a feature that you turn on with exceptions? So when you want to minify and compact all of your CSS and all of your JavaScript, DNN allows you to do that in a couple of click boxes, and you know that very well may blow up your website because some modules are built and they're not allowed for that and they're not prepared for it. So you click it and you test your website, and there are warnings there that tell you, hey, if you do this, maybe it'll work well, or maybe it'll create problems for you. Couldn't we do something similar with jQuery?
With jQuery,
I think that would be the appropriate direction.
It was planned to be like that. Because in DNN, don't quote me on the versions, but I think on DNN 6, jQuery was only loaded if you were in admin mode. If you were a regular user, it wasn't loaded. If you build a module, there was recommendation and you needed to request jQuery. So if you request,
yes, I remember that.
Yeah. After that, now I think it just loads. Your admin or not, it just loads. So it was planned for that, but the plans changed.
Oh, okay. So for 2 seconds, Andrew, you said something a minute ago, and we talked over it.
I was just saying, I think jQuery is a great tool, and I think it should be. Me personally, I would like it as something that I could choose to install on my DNN website or not. Just like I can choose to install JWT, for example, and the different things that are included and shipped with DNN, but aren't installed by default. And the reason, and for me, where I would find this valuable is jQuery is not the lightest weight thing in there in the world. It's not super heavy, but it's not the lightest thing in the world. And if it's just another it's another front end dependency that you need to load and when you access the website.
Oh, so a lot of frameworks. I mean, just real quickly. Yeah. A lot of frameworks now have either gone to the slim jQuery if they do have a dependency, right, which is a much lighter version of jQuery. Yep. And some of them have already announced that the next versions are not going to even have jQuery.
Can you give me an example of this? Interesting.
That's not a definitive, but they're talking about it.
Could you do me a favor and find me a note or a place where that's described? I'd like to reference that as we kind of get this back together. So just stepping back from this as a good discussion topic to say, okay, we can hear some good ideas in this. We can hear some things that we want to move towards. Let's turn around and start to make this actionable. Let's take this to something that we can turn into an issue. And we might not do it here in the meeting, but we'll do it after the meeting. And before we shut down, we'll post some ideas. David?
Yeah, can I just say one thing about that? Like, this is obviously a big thing, right? So
yeah, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, is the idea of this for a moment.
One of the things that I would just encourage everybody to do is to really understand the direction that has already been determined and is being executed as it relates to DNN. So that helps you set your expectation for some of this. So like some of these things like it's probably not going to happen anytime soon, so don't get your hopes up.
It's not something that's going to happen.
It doesn't mean that it's not a good idea. March, it doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do or anything like that. It's just that there are defined priorities already and where we're going, what we're doing next, and all that. So a good place for that is Mitch Seller's blogs on this, and where he lays out things like talking about .NET Core. Well, there's no sense in really talking too much about that right now because we're not doing that right now.
Right. But as a good example, we're saying that we see that there's going to be a setting the stage actions. We're going to set the stage for eventually jQuery going out the door. Okay, well that's not tomorrow, and it's not next month, but it's down the line. Okay, so what are some small steps that can help a developer like Andrew get what he wants, which is a rendered version of DNN, not logged in as administrator, a rendered version of DNN, not automatically loading jQuery without a whole bunch of hassle that he has to do to modify core. So Daniel pointed out that in the past, it used to be loaded conditionally. Well, could there be some actions taken to help move back towards a control or a setting, or even if it's not exposed there, just something in the database that they could get it back to where it's loaded conditionally? Maybe some other enhancements on that are, what version are we loading? Is Slim already in the list that's there available? I don't remember. It's been a little while since I looked. But if it's not, adding Slim into that list would be one of the versions to say, you know what, load it conditionally, but if you're going to load it, give the person an easy option to load Slim instead of full. You know, and set some expectations for having some more control over it. To me, that seems like a couple of smaller baby steps that lead down the path to a bigger plan with jQuery. Would you agree with that?
So I had a question, Ryan, and this kind of comes out of some of the discussion that we're having in the chat. How hard is it to do something like this? And I first said it's hard to say, and Daniel brought up a really good point of it's really the third-party modules.
They're definitely the ones that are going to be impacted, for sure.
Exactly. So
just creating a button that does this would set the stage for those module developers who in the future say, oh, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. They're also going to adjust and follow
Right. So I have a question that was partially answered earlier, and so we were talking about how do we deprecate an API in DNN as people submitting pull requests and people working in the community. And to me, that conversation was more focused on the C# side of stuff and APIs accessing, you know, back-end features of the platform. Now we're talking about front-end APIs. How do we go about deprecating? If we wanted to, let's just make the assumption. Let's say we're going to deprecate jQuery by DNN 11, and we're probably not going to do that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that we're going to do that. How do we go about communicating that out in two facets? We need to communicate that out to the developers working on the third-party module, so they know to rip it out and to start using native JavaScript. And we would need to notify them somehow in code, because when you write a C# module and you reference part of the DNN API and you're using a deprecated API call, it will say there right there in the IDE when you're programming, hey, this API call is marked for deprecation and will be removed by DNN 11. And that gives you, as a programmer, the understanding that I shouldn't use this API, I should use something different. As far as a front-end developer, we don't have that type of, as far as I understand, we don't have that type of power to communicate somebody from the code that they're using jQuery and that's going to be gone in our argument here by DNN 11. And so my question boils down to, how do we talk about removing something from the front-end library that DNN uses? And
yeah, I think that the questions that you're asking are good questions, and they're
I have an answer for that question, though.
I was going to say, these are also questions that are being tackled all the time now by the Technology Advisory Group, and that roadmap items are a big part of that, and community discussion, and information is a big part of that, but deciding what gets deprecated, that's also the tag. Also, you know, ways to promote that or make that information known, also part of the tag. Here, at a user group level, we are a little removed. You know, several of us have feet in one pool and feet in the other at the same time. But we're talking about ideas that we want to see happen, or we're talking about doing some pull requests. We're not making in one little action saying, hey, this is the plan we think, deprecate by X. That gets made by decision and by committee of a larger group and discussion. And I know that wasn't exactly what you were talking about there, but I think that it's definitely something that it's called by the community and by the group. Daniel, you were going to say?
Yes, just to add to that, I put you the link to one of those articles, but there used to be with every breaking change a developer quick start outlining what changed, not from a user perspective, but from a developer perspective. And that's the place where you usually had your module developer recommendations, best practices, what changed, what APIs you need to update. That's where it should be documented. And
I was going to chime in, kind of tagging on what Daniel's saying, you know, with the docs project, right? So when things get deprecated. And I think that one of the goals of the group, Kelly could confirm this, but is to kind of have the docs, and David may be able to confirm this, have the docs integrated into the code in the sense of like those, code suggestions, or like when it says something's deprecated and like go here for more, it would point to the, DNN documentation. And, that would be where you could have those quick start guides, or where it could say this method was, deprecated and replaced by whatever. So again, just plug in the docs as a way to kind of help with the communications, what you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the place where we can document stuff that we cannot document in code. So the front-end dependencies, that stuff, it's not hard, it's not tied like C# code and stuff, so you can document it there.
Did you see that, David? IE, was that showing? I realized I shared a different browser. Because I did pull that up while you were talking, Daniel, and describe it, but I realized it wasn't on the screen share. So yeah, we jumped into some of this to talk about these quick start guides. Okay, so as an idea or as a topic, this is an example of one that has some bigger motion to it, some bigger activity and conversation, but it also has some shorter term things that I could imagine some people finding benefit to and putting it in as an issue with some short term goals or some short term requests or examples of what we'd like to see having happen. Andrew, that was a really, really good one. To keep the conversation going around to some of the other folks that are here on, Daniel, you were talking a moment ago. How about you? Something you'd like to see, a couple of things you'd like to see in the next DNN versions that you haven't already just jumped in and started making happen on your own, or something you've heard people talk about that you'd like to see?
I'm a very pragmatic guy, and I go with small items that I know I can handle.
Winner.
But if I look far in the future, I think we need, I don't know how many 9 releases we're going to have, but in 9, we need to concentrate on, unfortunately, it's not something nice that we're going to see, but we need to concentrate on deprecating everything that we hope to remove in 11. If we miss that, then that means the nice things that require to remove stuff will go to 12. So that's one focus area before jumping the big version. Make sure we cut everything we need to deprecate. And it's boring stuff, and it's
that's a let me grab that piece right there, because that's a really good point to think about. If we want it to be gone in 11
major versions,
right? If we want it to be gone in 11, we have to deprecate it now. So even though it's going to hurt to have those conversations to talk about it, if we want it gone 2 versions from now, we have to deprecate it now. So do you imagine that we might have a release that, even though there's certain things that get done in that release will have a bunch of things where we've had those conversations and said, look, we're going to deprecate these 16 things, and that's going to be a release that includes a bunch of deprecations. There may not be a single action taken, but it's a declaration that these things are going to be deprecated.
And that is part of the cleanup effort I was talking about.
Bingo! Full circle. All right, that was a nice one. Daniel, go on.
That's one thing I see in the larger future, and I'd like to start seeing quicker, smaller releases. There was a lot of changes, and we had to handle a lot of legacy stuff, and we had to deal with stuff that we did not decide, and we had to deal with it. So yeah, there was a lot of work involved, and it took time to get the last 2 releases. And we're getting there. I'm hopeful that the release is gonna start to be quicker and smaller increments until it gets worse. When we're gonna start deprecating stuff and bumping technology, those releases gonna be massive changes. But I'm hopeful that we're gonna get reduce the number of issues and fix all the small stuff before crossing that bridge, if possible. And in the short term, like accessibility, there's been a lot of talks, and that doesn't need to be one massive issue. we can start improving
little
controls. We can start improving one module, and this is stuff we can put in minor releases. It's an improvement. It's not a breaking change, and that's the kind of small improvements I'd like to start seeing. Even if it's not perfect, if you didn't fix everything, you're still moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Clint, you haven't said much. You had some suggestions you'd put on the table?
Well, I've been putting most of my stuff on the floor here. I don't know if you can see all these, hold on a second, balloons that I've been, well, you can't see. There's like a ton of balloons that I'm blowing up over here. There we go.
And he wants them to be included in DNN.
Yeah, these are for, well, he asked what I was putting on the floor or in the air.
Yeah, I guess I did, very specific. Put on the table.
But no, I do have something.
Be quiet.
So, yes, MV Quick Balloon. I would like...
Candidate party?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a 1-year-old coming up here.
Yeah, you ought to see all the stuff that we've got going on down here. It's ridiculous. Anyway, what I would like to see in DNN is, and I don't know what this would look like, but I want to see it in some way work towards getting where people can do Blazor in DNN, and that may be with the arrival of .NET Standard or whatever. I'm kind of on the side, keeping an eye on the Blazor community and what's going on with it, and there's just a lot of energy and traction going on around it. Like today, Telerik announced components or extensions, whatever you want to call it, for Blazor, right? So like everybody that's like, I don't know, keeping track or whatever, they're kind of paying attention and seemingly, I'm not going to say betting on Blazor, but they're putting a lot of time and effort there. So I would like to see it where we could capitalize on that energy and momentum and make DNN Blazor friendly.
I was following you until you mentioned something like Telerik, and I could experience and love it.
What does a Blazor friendly DNN world look like to you? Is it using Blazor as a module pattern? Is it the what does the world look like?
I don't know what this looks like, but basically it would mean where I, as a module developer, could create a module and it just be Blazor code, and then I maybe like add a using or inherits or whatever, so I could get the DNN context, page, users, whatever, and then go from there.
So I'm not doing that next, Dave. Sorry, I saw Dave calling me out, asking that's what I'm doing next.
Well, if we'd have been at the bar at DNN Summit and challenged Andrew, he'd be like, give me until tomorrow morning.
That's right. Well, we know you can't really do it, Andrew, so.
No, I'm not doing it. And I did Razor pages last year. This year I want to have a few beers.
There's a time clock ticking. You just got married. Statistically speaking, you've got to have a baby on the way in the next 2 to 5 years. You got a certain period of time you can actually devote to getting some things done here before, like Clint, you're finding yourself blowing up balloons and putting them on the floor instead of putting out Blazor pages or modules or whatever you're going to be doing. So you got to get on it, man.
So Clint, I will tell you, right, your talk on Blazor inspired me. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and play with this a little bit. I wonder if I could get a Blazor module working in DNN, right? Like just build a Blazor app and get it working as a module in DNN. Yeah, I almost did it, and then I realized that you can do a standalone Blazor app. The problem is it has to run NIIS in the proper type of application. So DNN is not that proper type of application that it uses. So I ran into a brick wall there, but I believe with a little bit of imagination that might
somebody can make it happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ground to be gained there, and everybody kind of views DNN as, old, outdated, antiquated, but if you started like associating DNN and Blazor, it would change the perception a lot. And so that's, I don't know, I just see it as not the flavor of the week. I see it as more than that.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't know, some specific things that I might add into the list are maybe some things that aren't important anymore. Maybe they used to be important and nobody cares about them anymore. They're really minor things. But one thing I thought of hey, something that's been needed for a while, or I thought's been needed, but will take some setup work to do, but it's a specific task, and it kind of is standalone. But within a DNN instance, especially if you're hosting multiple websites on different portals, you have one robots text file. And I don't know how much robots text files actually matter anymore in today's world. But back in the day, there was a time when they were fairly important. And there are things that you can specify in robots text that if this was the only portal or the only site in your DNN instance, you would specify some things about the owner and the name and the domain name and some other things like that. But you can't do that in DNN because the robots text file is universal. And it's an item that applies even if you have 20 different domains with completely different companies and organizations. There's just one robots text file. And one of the things that I could put in as a request is, if robots text is still an important item to do or to set up things for, I'd love to see a control that allowed for the generation of a dynamic robots text file so that it could have some of this information that would become portal specific when you loaded it under specific domain names. Is that an idea of something that's still important to do, is still worthwhile in considering? I don't know, but that's a thing that I've had kicking around in my head for a while that at one point in time was important.
I just posted you a link there to something. So that there used to be a blog on this by Bruce Chapman.
Really?
On this of how to handle these scenarios.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was fairly in-depth.
It was
unfortunately,
5 years ago, if that was the case,
too. The identity site, unfortunately, doesn't exist anymore.
So you went to cache.
Now, you can find it in the
Internet Archives.
Yeah. But this is the closest thing to it that I've been able to find out there, and this is somebody that's recently joined. Yeah, he's been in the community for a long time, but he's recently joined some of the advisory group, and you might find this pretty good. He tries to link over to the Bruce Chapman because this is an older blog too.
Yeah, but it doesn't live.
That doesn't work anymore. So, but that will give you the URLs for you to search on Web Archives. So, do that. But there's ways to do this now, but it's interesting.
He mentions this is fairly straightforward and can be configured within minutes, but it's not automatically or dynamically done. And that might be something that would be nice to bring in to core. And I put it back to you, David, since you knew what I'm talking about here. Is that still important anymore? Is that something that's really useful to do, or it's fairly well ignored by most crawlers anyways, and therefore you're only doing the letter of the law instead of actually what gets used?
It is important if you are running a multi-tenant DNN instance, right? And public facing.
Yeah.
And you care about SEO. Yes,
sure.
Yes, absolutely. It's still relevant and important.
So there's an
example.
We
never run into that because we just don't.
You don't do multi-portal, yeah. So that's an example of something that.
This is one item that could be implemented not as a breaking change. It could be in the SEO part of the persona bar per site, and it's a text file. It would not be too hard to implement, and we could implement it in a way that wouldn't be a breaking change. So the default master one could remain in place.
Yeah. I also see, at least I start to get the idea of what they were doing. They were doing a URL rewrite rule and putting it in the web config so that they could call certain text files for it. So to some extent, this is the methodology, Daniel, that would be possible, that if you wanted to go and enable this, then enabling it inside of the persona bar in the SEO area would cause an update into the web config to put in some of these things. Okay, here, I'm adopting this one. I can take this.
Just send the pull request. I'll approve it.
Yeah, I can do this. I can get it organized, and I can write it up as an issue with all of the documentation and information relating back to this. I can pass it out, and then I can imagine. I can't build a persona bar elements or changes, but I can see what would need to be done here, and it's not going to hurt anybody. If nobody ever touches it, then it doesn't affect anybody. The standard exists.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Very actionable.
Just like the emails where you have a global setting, and if you go by site, then you override the global one. So whatever was in place stays there. If you decide to override it, then we do that. That's not a breaking change. We can implement anytime.
Well, so we're coming up on 8:20 here. It's going to be time for us to start wrapping up our DNN Summit meeting, Southern Fried DNN User Group meeting. I've got already things spooling up in my head that I have to mention.
Ryan?
And I have one more.
Yes, I was going to say, before we leave the topic, I don't want to leave just yet, but I want to say we had a chance to talk about a lot of ideas. Anybody else have parting items that they want to add in?
I heard a faint voice in the background that sounded like Pete Good.
Please,
sorry, I'm really hoarse right now.
Oh, he is. He's losing
what kind of horse did you buy?
Not one that runs very fast, that's for sure. So one of the things that we're doing at my primary work is considering putting in incorporating WalkMe into our product. Now, the product that I'm working on is giant and it's industry specific, but I'm curious if there's a way that .NET Nuke could incorporate some of these like little bits of training and heck, incorporate WalkMe. I think that would be cost prohibitive, but incorporate
WalkMe?
It's basically you add it into, the way I understand it is you add it into your software and it calls and it some way dynamically starts to build walkthrough tutorial for your users. So the truth is you've got David and Clint and Ryan and all you guys and Andrew who's going to build a Blazor web component app in 15 minutes. But then you've got some of us who, when we go out and use DNN, we use it basically because we want a version of WordPress that actually works. And we want to be able to have something that's secure and we've got some confidence in. But we're not developers. We put stuff in and we open up the control panel and we see stuff and go, I bet that does really cool stuff for smart people. But I'm not one, so I don't know how to use it. And I'm certain there's a ton of great tools that I'm not even touching. And if there was something that said, you know, maybe even on a time delay that just said, hey, it's now 15 days ago you logged in. The last time you logged in, you did this. Let's give you a couple of suggestions. Maybe here's how you add your Google Analytics, and it walks you through how to add that. And it walks you through the process of updating and upgrading and improving your site.
Okay, hey Pete, can I rephrase to see if I'm picking up the idea of what you're describing? Because I followed you up to a point, and then I realized I think your intent was something like a completeness level, so that if you've just set up a DNN website and you're not sure what to do next, you think you got some pages going, but something that looks at the content or the settings or the setup that you've done in your DNN instance, and the next time you log in as an administrator, it says, hey, we noticed you haven't connected up Google Analytics. Do you want that? If so, click over here. You know, something that the next time after that says, we noticed you haven't filled out your SEO information on pages. Complete that, and you get up to 80% done in the setup of your DNN site. Something like that?
Some of it could be the gamification of the setup, and some of it could simply be the ability for those of us who are DNN users and integrators to a small extent of being able to say, hey, what does this do? Instead of clicking my favorite useless thing from older versions of .NET Nuke, when the help command simply recited the
same statement. Okay, so let me grab two of those because there are two good parts in that that are perfect. One, the help is getting better, and you can go to the documents, docs that Clint is participating in heavily, and those are getting better.
Yes, it is, and I do want to make sure I call that out. I'm not, by any means, I think the help has gotten phenomenal.
Way getting better. But number two, about the, about the idea of what you described here, I think that's a module. I think that's something that gets built, and it's an add-on that goes on top. I don't know that.
There's things already existing.
That's where I'm going with it.
Like Site Improve.
Site Improve is a great module that can get added.
I didn't know that.
There's a free version of Site Improve that you don't have to have. But I would also encourage you to stay tuned to SoFri later this year, this spring, as we start to take a look at a second review of Shine. I think that some of what you're describing there about the hand-holding of helping administrators know what's going on their website and where they need to take some action, Smeltzer has taken a lot of action towards that, and Shine is going to get you what you've described right there. Somebody doesn't have to invent it. He's been doing that, and there's some pretty impressive stuff coming with that in the next several months.
Right. And one of the documentation is good, but a good product is one you don't need a manual.
I wholeheartedly agree. As a UXer, I think if you have to teach somebody, you've got improvements to the product. But my wife's also an instructional designer, so I have to throw her a bone every once in a while, and she has to say, okay, well, I got to teach somebody how to do something. But, even the best products, even your iPhone or your Android phone has places that are somewhat in blind spots. And I think you need to say that out loud.
So Pete chimed in there with some ideas, and I think the other person who was on was Mark Busey. Did he have any things that he wanted to add in? Mark, are you still on with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, you're kind of in the same group there of folks who use DNN, and as an integrator and as a manager, what have you thought about some of the things tonight, and do you have some ideas of things that you'd love to see in DNN coming up?
Well, honestly, a lot of that stuff we talked about tonight, although I understand in concept, is over my head as far as being able to do anything about it. But recognize it as being good stuff. I would have to second what Pete was just saying about making the end user more aware of the good stuff that they don't know about yet. But no, I didn't come prepared to contribute very much, so I think that's about it.
You'll chime in by upvoting different ideas and things as they occur, for sure.
Yes.
Well, back to everybody else in the group. Any other ideas, or David or Clint, did anything come up in chat that we should?
Yeah, we were discussing in chat about the DNN store needs a revamp.
Not on the docket for what we're discussing tonight.
Yes, it is. It is actually. It's not part of that, but in DNN. I don't know if it was in 7 or 8 that it was introduced.
That module?
The store was integrated with the extensions page. So you could enter your store credentials there, and within DNN, you could search for modules and install them right there. Another thing that got pulled up in the persona bar, and you could actually see if there was an update available for the modules you have installed. Those two things were very nice features that we see in a lot of other systems that got ripped out with the persona bar.
I apologize. I started to lump that into a certain type of conversation, but you are 100% correct. That is part of what we're talking about tonight, and when that feature first came out a long time back, I was very excited about it, and it was something that I got excited about. The idea of having an integrated marketplace, and immediately some of my thoughts turned to the fact that all of the things that were listed there were in the DNN store, which was good, but we also needed to have forgetting the name of the open repo where we had everything, Codeplex. I was like, GitHub. That's all I could think of in my head. We need to have the open
Forge.
Yeah, we need to have the things that were in the Forge, and we need to have things that were in Codeplex. And it's kind of like we need to have more than just the DNN store repository there. And there was a lot of problem with the display of how things were shown in there. But it did have some neat stuff in that if you had purchased a module and you already had ownership of it, then it could show you the modules that you already had purchased, and then you could install them on this DNN site. There's a lot of stuff that you have inside of Joomla, that you have inside of WordPress, that people take for granted, that would be a nice feature. And that extensions module is fairly siloed, is fairly isolated thing that it could conceivably get some updates like this. Now, I think
but
that
dependent on the DNN store itself.
Yes.
Now, the other thing that he mentioned, though, was something a little different.
Okay.
It was when you go to extensions, you're looking at that, and you could quickly tell whether or not there was an update available,
right,
and whether or not it's being used on the site. Right.
And honestly, I'm showing my ignorance there. We don't have that right now. That feature got lost.
No, well, not that there's an update available.
I did not realize that. If I'm looking to check on updates, it's on older versions of DNN than on 9, so I haven't gone to pay attention to that.
Platform, you can tell that if you have that check.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But,
then we do need that. We need that feature back. We absolutely need that feature back.
And that's two-way, because it checks if the module has updates, and on the installer, it's used to only show you modules that are tested to be compatible with the DNN version you're using. Yep. So that would be a good incentive to push third-party developers to update their modules. Did you take your module and pass it to the extension verification service, and that it works on that version, and it's in your manifest, and I don't know, some kind of signature, whatever, that, okay, you're good to go, and you're going to be showing up on everybody's site. So that would motivate third-party developers to keep their modules up to date more. I think would be a good incentive. And related to that, not only the modules, but DNN itself could be easier to upgrade, meaning that it could be a one-click thing, would back up your system and do the upgrade and revert if there's any fail.
So there are some third-party modules that will do that now. Evativa has a version of that where they have an installer, an upgrade tool that will bundle in the actions of Evativa backup and then upgrade your DNN instance, and if there were errors, it'll step back and restore the old and log, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a good third-party solution that does that, but you're right, making it part of the core might be more responsible.
The challenge with that is, what's the cloud story on that to do a backup of a DNN website when I only have provisioned one database catalog?
Yeah, you run into some.
I mean, that's part of what Evativa is doing. It's doing script backups, and it's creating files and zipping them and all of that jazz. So it's not always. I mean, it can do, but it's not always doing a native backup.
Right. Well, I've never used that tool, but the first thing that jumps to mind is, okay, if I have something hosted in Azure, I have a web app and I have a SQL instance. I don't have a full SQL instance, and I don't have a full Windows server. I have a piece of it. And so I don't really have a space on disk where I can store a back file. I don't have a place on disk where I can really store a zip file of all of my stuff. I mean, what you would end up doing with the cloud story is you'd be using deployment slots. You'd have to provision a new database well, you could create a backup file there. I mean, my point being is it's significantly different on how you would do it in a cloud-hosted environment if you're doing app as a service versus doing it on a Windows server.
In Evativa's tool, when you set up your backup rules and settings, you say whether you want local backups at all, and if you don't, you configure FTP locations, Azure locations, S3 locations, or Dropbox locations, and you can have any one or mixture of all of those participating in the activities.
Okay, well then that solves that problem, or sounds like it solves that problem.
Yeah, that would be the model I would take if it was something that was being rebuilt.
I think your point there, Andrew, is interesting because DNN gets used in many different ways and in many different environments, right? Some people don't even use it to run a website. They actually use it just as a back-end system, for things. Every situation is somewhat unique, and putting something like that in place has to cover all
a lot of bases
if it's going to be part of the core product. So, big decision there if that was.
Well, so we've kind of run around the table a few different times, and the extensions was probably the newest set of things that I think we shouldn't forget about, for sure. But any other ideas here before we wrap up? It's about 8:30, and I kind of want to end it here closer to 8:30 rather than we stretch on to 9. Not because there aren't good things to come, but any other parting thoughts as we wrap up? I think it was a good conversation, and I think it was a positive one. I think that with a lot of the conversations that happen online, Facebook's a good example of a place where people don't always productively think about conversation. And I think talking with folks, there was some worry that we might have gripe sessions or something like that here today, and I think we didn't. We had positive conversation about a few actionable items, and if someone's watching this on replay, I'm hoping that you are thinking about things that you want to see in DNN, and if you didn't in the beginning, you have a better idea on how to go through and start to log those and get those into the right place so that they can be, trying to get back to my screens here, you can get into the right place so that they can be logged. You know the idea that you're going in and creating an issue and you're calling it RFC, so that's request for comments, and you're putting in your suggestions and your ideas, and people are taking it from there and working on it. And hopefully we'll follow up with some examples of what we've done. I pitched 1 or 2 good items that I think I have enough ideas around that I can put into issues for, and we can follow those and see what happens with them. Maybe nothing does. Maybe they get put in and we get something into a point something release. But I'm definitely encouraging everybody to do that as well. So the folks who are here in roundtable discussion, you guys are already involved. But everybody else who's watching this afterwards, I want you to get involved too. So that's tonight's Southern Fried meeting. What we are going to wrap up with now is Rev Debug was our sponsor for the night, and they have given us a couple of door prizes here. Last time it was 2 licenses. Do we have 2 licenses again today too, or just 1?
1 year subscription.
1 year subscription. All right. So for those who were online, we have another chance here, and we're going to see who wants to win.
I hope this works.
Wants to take this home? Right. Just give me a ticket. Just give me a ticket, David. So David took care of everybody who was online, and
pulled out more than 1.
No, I know. And so I've got 1, and I've got a backup. So we have our groups online who are available for this. Mark Buslig, we had picked you as a potential winner for this Visual Studio plugin, Rev Debug. Mark, are you still on? I happen to know you're not much of a Visual Studio person. You're not running Visual Studio to build and compile things. You're certainly welcome to it, though. Would you like a copy of Rev Debug to take a look at, or do you want me to?
You said please don't get this.
Put it back.
I appreciate winning, but maybe someone else could use it a little bit better.
Well, I will trade you out for some extra swag that we'll try and pass your way at DNN Summit as a trade for that. I'll give you some Southern Fried swag that we can. My number 2 ticket that I pulled out was for Daniel Valadas. I have your ticket here as the other one that I pulled, and I think that if you haven't tried out Rev Debug, you might like to take a look at that and give that a try. So David will pass you the information and get it to you here in the next few days.
Daniel, ping me on Slack or send me an email, and I'll get that information over to you.
Yep. All right. So thank you very much to everybody who participated in tonight's roundtable. I think it was an active, good conversation. Thank you again to our sponsors. Here ahead of us, we will not have a February DNN's Southern Fried User Group meeting. I have DNN Summit on the brain. I do today, man. It's just so bad. So we won't have a Southern Fried User Group meeting in February because we will all be at DNN Summit. And therefore, I'd encourage you, if you haven't already made plans, please make plans. But the next third Thursday, which is February the 21st, I believe we'll be doing DNN After Dark at that point. And we will all be relaxing and partying at this point in time from having 3 full days of conference training and sessions at this point. So check out Twitter, check out YouTube. You'll see those things start to pop up as we're going through and really having an enjoyable time with everybody out at DNN Summit. Our next Southern Fried User Group meeting will be on the third Thursday of March, is also March the 21st. So, all right. So March the 21st is our next user group meeting. We will plan to have some folks on to talk about a recap of DNN Summit and the things that were learned and things that were seen. We will have David talking a little bit about NV Quick Theme and some of the changes and releases that were in that recently that came out. Andrew doesn't know it, but he's here now, so he'll be coming to talk to us about the security security module release that he put out. Well, roughly.
What am I doing?
No, I didn't know that he was already going to be talking at TADOG here in a few weeks. So I thought we were getting the first time exclusive, but he's already gone to see Adderson, and that's acceptable because Adderson does a good show as well.
I mean, he's closer.
We'll have you. We will have you come on and recap a little bit more on March if you're available. But other than that, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We always appreciate you being here with us in person and being with us online after the fact. Please, if you haven't already, register for DNN Summit, and we will see you in a few weeks in person in Denver, Colorado.